and we're just going to kind of keep going with where things are. So, questions on what we're doing? Everybody good? People who weren't here got the file up and running and they saw the overview just now? All right. So, if we do a preview of the layout, our score is working. Remember, arrow keys are what moves our player around. The enemies are kind of wandering towards me, and I'm running out of space to try and get away. So maybe the spawn is still happening too fast because I get overwhelmed pretty quick. Obviously, we don't have like hit points yet. We don't have game over logic yet. But it's there, and if we refresh, it'll start off with the same idea, where our character is here, gets this awful color yellow, with enemies coming towards them. So, what we can do now is we can add some nice animation touches. I'm actually going to go ahead and change the speed first to 2 and 4. So 2 is the minimum, and then 4 is the maximum number of random seconds before the next wave will spawn, just to make it a little bit more playable for right now. Those will get tweaked later on. What we want to do is we added the sign behavior, horizontal or vertical. We're going to build an array, which we haven't seen yet. But with that array, we're going to be able to build an array. I need to get the enemy, because the enemy has the sign behavior, for movement. We can set an array and put in like the word horizontal, put in the word vertical into the array. Then we can ask Construct to randomly pull an item from that array, and when the enemy is created, randomly set movement to what you just pulled. So that way it'll be horizontal or vertical at random. We could also adjust whether it's a sine wave or a square wave. Here's what a square wave looks like. It's just they'll move a little bit differently when they start coming out onto the screen. And I don't like the square wave because it's jumpy. We'll go back to the sine wave. Yeah, I don't want to do that. And we tried some of the other ones, but we'll stick with the sine wave for right now. We can adjust the magnitude and frequency and things like that. But for right now, we're going to add some effects that the enemies are going to create a little explosion when they're destroyed, and the particles are going to have a little explosion too when they're destroyed. So to do that, we're on the layout. I'm going to double click. And the object I'm going to make, because now I'm on the new Insert New Object menu, is particles. I'll click anywhere on the player layer for right now to drop it in. I'm going to click this resizing arrow up top, and I'm going to resize it to 10 by 10 pixels. So the width and height is 10 pixels. For color, I'm going to stick with my 250, 250, 250, and paint it that, or 50, 50, 50, this will be particles black. We'll do another one in a second for particles white. So here's my 50, 50, 50 off black color. And now we're going to adjust some of the properties in the particles. First, I'm going to rename it to particles black, because there will be a particles white. Then inside here, the rate at which we have it. So if we look about halfway down on here, we're not looking at common, we're not looking at instance variables or behaviors or effect. We're looking at properties, and this gets into the properties for the particles. The rate, I'm going to increase to 100. The spray cone, I'm going to set to 360 degrees. And on the bottom it says the number of degrees through which the particles are created. I want it to be created in a full circle. Then it has this idea for continuous spray. So let me show you what continuous spray looks like. So there is a continuous spray particle that's just always going right now. We don't want that. We want it to be one shot. So once it's done spreading out, it's going to go away. The speed, I'm going to change to 400. The size, I'm going to change to 10 pixels. The grow rate, I'm going to adjust to -50. So that means that they're going to shrink over time as they start to disappear. And then the speed randomizer, I'm going to set to 200, but we may adjust that later. Oh no, that's size randomizer. I'm going to leave that at 0. And speed randomizer, I'm going to lower to 200. So destroy mode, it's going to fade to invisible. So if I refresh this here, there's my thing. It's there. So the particles black is working, and we want to have it spawn whenever the enemy is destroyed. So I'm going to go over to the event sheet now. Scroll down. I'm going to be adding a new event. The new event is going to be on the enemy. And I'm going to click on the search bar here, and I'm going to look for on destroyed. On destroyed is what I'm grabbing. And the action we're going to add to enemy on destroyed is for the enemy to spawn another object. So again, search, I'm going to start typing in spawn another object. And now the object I want it to spawn is that particles black object. Now it says it's going to be on layer 0. I'm going to delete that, start typing in quotes. Because if you start typing in the quotes, you can actually put in the layer name, and you can make sure this gets on the right layer. And I'm just going to go and select this player layer. By double-clicking it, it ends up finishing the word player layer, puts the quotes around there. So I don't have to remember that player layer was layer 1. I just have to remember I don't want it on the background layer. So now, if I run this layout here, when an enemy gets destroyed, it's going to have that little explosion. So it's just kind of giving us affirmation that, hey, we got it, and we're going through, we're getting hit. So we may have to institute like a health system, like maybe you can get hit like a certain number of times. Sorry. So, Alex, what do you got?
What was the settings for the particles black?
Particles black. All right. So particles black on the actual particles object. I scrolled down and I started at rate. Rate was the first one I adjusted. And I set rate to 100. Spray cone to 360. Type got changed to one shot. Speed I set to 400. Size I set to 10. Grow rate I set to -50. And then speed randomizer down here in particle lifetime properties I set to 200. All right, and then I think I'm going to do one more thing here. In the initial properties, I'm going to set the, let's say the speed randomizer from 200 to 50. See if that makes it last a little bit less on the screen. So I'm going through every time, WASD, every time. That looks good. All right. So to make a shortcut to have like a little white particle spawn that shows the white particle, or shows the projectile getting destroyed, I'm going to right-click on particles black and choose clone object type. Put it on the player layer. It should now be named particles black 2. But I'm just going to rename it to particles white. I'm going to double-click up here and then change the color with the paint bucket here to the 250, 250, 250, red, green, and blue, the off-white color. And now everything else should kind of run the same. But on the event sheet, I'm going to duplicate this action by right-clicking and choosing copy. I'm going to select the whole event, and I'm going to hit paste. And it should put another one of these particles black being spawned in here. I'm going to right-click on this and choose replace object. I'm looking to replace particles black with particles white. So if we run the layout now there's a little bit of white mixed in there. Maybe I'll adjust the size, make the white a little bit smaller so it's not like blending all the colors together, because it's kind of hard to see the black with the white overlaid. So what we'll do in here is we'll go to the particles white on the layout. And I'm going to move particles black off the layout just for now so that I don't see it at the start of the layout. And I'm going to say, all right, speed will leave the same. Size, maybe we'll cut it to 5. Grow rate, and grow rate is the changes over time in pixels per second. Maybe we'll change that to negative 25. And then speed randomizer, maybe I'll cut that in half to 25. And then speed, maybe we'll do 200. So I cut everything in half that I adjusted. And we'll run and see how that looks. I'm looking for a smaller white explosion overlaid with the black explosion. So let's see, how does that look? That's kind of what I'm looking for. Looks all right. All right, so we got that working. You all right?
Yeah, I was just trying to set our level.
Trying to break my table, that's what you're trying to do. All right. So, I want to see where we're going next. And I want to try and create the array, because what we can do with the enemy, we can do enemy onCreated. So I'm just typing in onCreated there. For enemy onCreated, I can add an action to the enemy, and there are actions I can set for sign. I can set active, I can set magnitude, period, initial state, wave, movement. So movement is what I'm looking for. But right now I have to set it to, let's see, horizontal, vertical, size. Now if I do size, does it just say done? Set it to size. Forwards and backwards only. So what I want to happen is I want half the time the movement to be vertical. I want the other half the time the movement to be horizontal. So we need to make a little sub-event here. So I'm going to do another one here, and then we'll say 50% of the time. So what we'll do here is we'll add an event, system, well, we need a variable. So I'm going to do a new variable. That variable is going to be sign, I don't know, movement. It's going to be 0 for right now. So what I want to do is, we have enemy onCreated here already. So we don't want to update the initial state. But what I want to do is I want to add an event that when the enemy is created, we're going to add an action to the system to set the value of sign movement. And I'll say floor random 0, 2. So what that'll be is it'll either be 0 or 1 when the enemy is created. And actually, do we want to do this as a global variable, or do we want to do it as a, let's do it as an instance variable. We're going to go back and we're going to delete this sign movement variable. I'm actually going to teach you about an instance variable. I'm going to go to the enemy, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to make an instance variable. So what this does is it pops up a little menu that only the enemy that makes this can see this variable. And we're going to call this sign movement, and we're going to give it initial value of 0. So every enemy that's created will have an instance variable called sign movement. When the enemy is created, what we're going to do is we're going to add an action to the enemy, and we're going to ask the enemy to set its value of sign movement to the same thing, floor random 0, 2. So that'll set it to, sign movement is changed. Now we can do a sub event in here. We've done sub events here. We're going to add a new sub event. And the new sub event is going to be for the enemy to compare instance variable. And if it's equal to 0, we're going to ask the enemy to set its sign movement to horizontal. And if we copy this, let's see, highlight the whole line, copy, paste, change this one. If it's equal to 1, we'll change the sign horizontal to vertical. So now when the enemies are created, they're given a variable sign movement. So now if we run this, let's see, some of them will be moving one way, some of them will be moving another way. So I think it's a little bit different. Some of them are going faster up and down, some of them are going faster left and right, which is kind of the effect that we wanted. Let's think about another instance variable, and let's try and add like a health to the player, because that way we can kind of start getting like when the player is destroyed. So just like we did for the enemy, so the instance variable for the enemy is just determining whether it's moving horizontal or vertically. You could also do some other random things there, just the speed when the enemy spawns. So some enemies would be fast, some enemies would be slow. But we're going to go over to the player. We're going to add an instance variable, and we'll call it HP for hit points. How many hits do you think is a good number for the player to take? 5? 5 hits? All right. So we'll do 5 hits for the player. So the player's got 5 health points. And we have to figure out when are we going to lose a health point. And the player is going to be what determines what loses the health point. We're going to go in and add a new event for the player. And it's going to be is overlapping with another object if that another object happens to be the enemy. Well, 1, we've been hit by the enemy. We don't got to get hit more than once by the enemy. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to destroy the enemy. So we'll add an action for enemy, destroy. The next action we're going to do is for the player, and we'll find that instance variables, and we're going to subtract 1 from the health. So this will subtract 1 from the health. We should probably display the health on the screen. We could do it in a couple different ways. We could make like the player take damage. For right now, the easiest thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clone the text score. So right-click, clone object type over here, where it says score. I'm going to change it from text score to text HP. And the text I'll change from score and 0. And we'll change it to health. Colon, space. Oh, we start off at 5. So we want it to start off at 5. So there's our health is 5. Maybe the font size for the health could be a little bit smaller than 48. That looks a little bit big. Maybe it's like 22. And I'll put it up in this corner for right now, just to kind of track and see how far we can go. So now we need to get some logic in. We subtract 1 from health when we overlap with the enemy, but we also have to ask the system to update it. So on every tick where we update score, I'm going to right-click and choose copy, and right-click and choose paste. So now this is going to update the same thing. Instead of update that, I'm going to replace the object with text HP and set it to health, colon. Now I can't use the global score, but I can use player, I spelled player right, player dot HP. So that's how you get to an instance variable. Is you say, what object is that instance variable? So player.hp will be there. We'll hit done. So what we can do is now, if we run this layout, it's just going to go negative when I get hit by the enemy. So let's see. I destroyed that one. And I'm looking to see how long can I go before an enemy hits me. So I'm going to turn my back on that one. That one hit me, and I'm at 4 health, 3 health, 2 health, 1 health. Then I'll get to 0, and now I'm at -1. Because we didn't account for what's going to happen when health gets to 0. We need to stop the player from being able to move. And so what we can do is we can say, all right, in the instance that the player compare the value of HP is equal to 0, we got to figure out what we want to do. This is where we'll get like an is alive logic in here. The first thing we'll do is we'll say, well, let's go and make the variable is alive. So we'll add another global variable is alive, give it an initial value of 1, and then on here, the action when player HP equals 0, we'll ask the system to set the value of is alive to 0. So now on here we have all these enemies moving and being spawned in every tick. So on the every tick, we're going to add a subcondition. So add another condition. System is going to be compare variable, and it's going to say as long as is alive is still equal to 1. So every tick when the is alive is equal to 1, player is going to rotate towards the mouse. Enemies are going to move and rotate. Text and score will update. Okay, so let's see what that does for us here on the shooter when our health gets to 0. So here's my player, and I'm just going to intentionally back into things. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Oh, I got to 1, but now I can't rotate. The enemies are still moving, and I can still control, and I'm still firing. So we need a couple more is alive equals 0. So player fire rate, we need to add that condition. System, compare variable, is alive is equal to 1. So only when is alive is equal to 1 will the player still fire. So we're going through, we're fixing things now. So I'll again back into things. 4, 3, 2, 1. Now I'm not getting it down to 0, but now I'm not firing. There's no more enemies spawning. All right. So we also have is alive is equal to 0. Undestroyed. Oh, you know why? It's because we stop the every tick, which updates the player health. So one of the things we'll do here is we'll copy this HP text health and player.hp. So we subtracted 1 from the health, but we said don't do every tick anymore. So what we'll do is we'll paste this in here, and we'll just say for a quick change of things, we'll say set that to 0. So it actually shows that it's 0. So the other thing we can do when system is alive equals 0, we can add an action to the player. And it's going to be 8 direction movement set enabled. And I'm going to set it to disabled. So that way the player can't move around anymore. We can add an action to the system. And I think there's an option for setting all. Let's see. Is there
Does it reset to assisted object?
Well, I want to stop the sign of all the enemies. So enemy set sign active to inactive. I don't know if that's going to do it for all of them, but let's see. So if we run this again, I've got to get hit 5 times. My score is going up. So I'll back into that one, that one, that one, that one. All right. So we stopped everything. Our health is now 0. And we're ready to start, like, maybe slowly destroying the enemies, tallying up the score, things like that. I don't know where I'm going to go next with this. So I'm going to stop here, stop the live stream, see where everybody is, and see what ideas you have to kind of make improvements on this. So I'm going to stop streaming.